What up, people? I am back for my other video. Today, we're for Bad Movie Wednesdays. I figured, why not finally take the plunge like I did with the Taken sequels? And I think this might be worse. I watched The Crow 2, or The Crow City of Angels, finally, after years of avoiding it, and I regret every. This was just bad, dude. Okay, fundamentally, the issue with this movie is that it's just a bad version of the first one. Like, literally. It even starts with you get the big landscape shot of the city, but the first one was done well. You have this city that had this cool design, and it just looks like kind of looks like a generic city, but it has this weird lighting. I don't know what they were going for, like, where it almost looks like a rave, but it just looks really bad. I think this came out in '96 is when this is supposed to look. So it's supposed to be somewhat futuristic, but they don't even really show it. Because I just apparently saw that just because it was on Wikipedia and said it. It's like, this movie just is, the character Ash is boring. You don't get, so him and his son get killed by this gang. Judas is the main leader of it, I guess. And you don't care about him as a villain. You don't care about their deaths. He then comes back, and then the one link, and I guess I didn't put two and two together when I was watching it. This is supposed to be the Sarah from the first film, but now she's an adult. So I guess this is our only link from the original film is her. And I didn't put two and two together. I thought this was just some random chick. They didn't, like, movie does a really bad job of making it, and then they do show something, and I guess that they mention Eric Draven, but Ash is then revived, and then basically it's just a bad version of the first movie. You don't care about any of the guys who are the killers, so you're just watching random people get killed, and you're just not into it. The kills aren't that great. Ash, some of his lines are just so bad. He's like supposed to be like, I'm like, is he just a poet, or like what is it? What are these lines? The way he's delivering them is just so over the top. And then, yeah, like I said, he just looks like a bad version of Eric Draven from the first one. He has a long trench coat like Eric Draven, the makeup, but it just doesn't look anything as good. The aesthetic of the city is not even as good. It's nowhere near as good, by the way. They did not put any care into this fucking movie. Like, I don't know what they were going for. Fundamentally, it should have just never had a sequel. The first one works. So what you're gonna fall into is you're just gonna repeat the same thing. Someone's gonna come back for revenge. And I looked ahead. I'm not watching The Crow 3 for a while, but it mentions that basically he comes back because he's framed for a murder that he didn't. He comes back because he's framed for a murder he didn't commit. So he comes back. It's the same. So it's just, you're just gonna do the same. You're basically just gonna do a bad version of the first one over and over again, and that's all it is. And that's what it looks like the remake's gonna be. But like, this one was just that. Like, you don't care about the character of Ash or his son. The flashbacks are terribly done. They even play like, there's a way to do flashbacks and it not be obnoxious. They can play like like you'll hear like a certain sound when the flashback's about to start, but they just blatantly do it so many times. And yeah, it's just so bad. It's badly done. I think what I'm going to title it is just a shit version of the first, because that's really what it is. It's just, essentially, it's the same story. There's no heart in this one. You could tell. You could tell this was just a forced sequel because the first one did well. They didn't understand that we were lucky with what happened. The unfortunate tragedy with Brandon Lee. The fact that we still got an iconic film like we did. And for them to just is like, let's try to do a sequel, and this is what we get. Just a very shit version of the first one. Just not as good. Ash is not an interesting character. Sarah, I'm going to be honest, I didn't even realize, the fact that I didn't put two and two together when I was watching the movie, that this woman is Sarah's. And the villains are so uninteresting. Granted, the only somewhat interesting villain was, can't think of his name, but I'll just say it's Iggy Pop. I think his name is Curve. They have very weird names. it was late '90s or mid to late '90s. I think it was mid '90s. It was like '96 when this came out. But yeah, Iggy Pop, he was probably the only interesting because he at least you could tell he's just like I'm just gonna ham it up and just be over the top. So he was probably like the only one of the movie that like you could I can kind of vibe with. But aside from that, everyone else, at least from the villain side, the villains were just he should have probably they fucked up making that Judas dude the main villain. I would have swapped. I would have had Iggy Pop be the main bad guy. He was far more charismatic. Curve just felt like a generic dude to me. He was, and then he even had like a similar. If you remember the Asian woman from the first one, where she knows about the crow and all that. Essentially, it's that from this. He has a similar like character, but except I guess she ends up turning good because they capture Sarah and she helps free Sarah later on. But yet she's like a blind woman who knows about the lore of the crow. So she's just there for basically dialogue dump. So yeah, this movie is just bad in every way. I was like, this is just boring bad, but then when Ash was delivering some of his bad poetry lines, I'm gonna be honest, I did start laughing. I was like, okay, we're getting a little bit funny bad here. It is just not a good movie. And they really should have stuck to it being one movie, but apparently this isn't the last sequel. There's like, I think at least three. I know there's one with fucking Edward Furlong at some point. And I know there's a third one because I'm gonna do the third one once we get closer to the release of the shitty new one. But yeah, this was bad, dude. This was awful. They should have. If why did Miramax just understand? Y'all lucked out with how great the first one turned out with what happened to Brandon Lee. You decide we're just because I guess it did well, and Hollywood just even back then it did well, so we have to do a sequel. We can't just understand that sometimes things are a one-off. I'll admit back then they still at least more understood it more compared to today, but it was still there, you know. So anyway, guys, let's get into this movie. Tomorrow I will be reviewing Truth or Dare. That movie, it's another one. Is kind of an interesting concept. It's like a fucked up Truth or Dare that you basically have to do something or you pretty much die. From what I've only seen it once, so I'm gonna definitely. It's Blumhouse, man. They're so disappointing as a studio, like because they have like you look at what A24 is doing, and it's like why can't Blumhouse do that? But it's like no, we have to just only care about fucking money and just have good concepts, but don't actually ever do anything with them. It's like multiple movies now that I can name that this is a theme, a common theme. So anyway, so I'll talk about that tomorrow. Yeah, but let's get into The Crow, City of Angels. If I were to give this movie a rating, this is almost like this is borderline a 1. I would probably give this like a 2.5 or no 2. Because this is 1.5. Because this is borderline a 1, dude. This movie is bad, dude. It's bad in every way. I don't really have any positives besides the soundtracks. They at least kind of it's not as legendary as the first movie, but the soundtrack has some neat like rock, and they at least kept that. But that's like the only positive I have. Everything else is pretty much negative. I think the acting was absolutely terrible, like from everybody. Minus Ziggy Pop. At least he hammed it up. But anyway, the movie starts. You know, you have this really bad city landscape shot, which it was supposed to be like from the first movie, but they did it so badly in this one. It's like you're not like when you because I was watching it the other day, a couple days ago now, but I when you see that landscape shot, you are immersed. You're like in there. In this, you don't have that. It's just a landscape shot with the bird flying, and but it was clearly an attempt to be and then you have like the, it was supposed, now that knowing it's supposed to be Sarah, it's supposed to be like, guys, it's like the first one. You have Sarah, now she's an adult. It just doesn't hit the same. Why even bring the character in there? This was just a bad. I like the character, but if you're just gonna make a sequel, just don't bring anyone back. Just do a different Crow. Having her, because you just want to have somewhat of a link, I guess, to the first movie. But you didn't. I didn't need to see Sarah as an adult. That almost defeats the purpose. The whole point of her being a little girl was that Shelley was like a mother to her. Now she's an adult. What's the point? Now she's just a generic adult character. That's what she was. She was just a lot of exposition dump. She was just basically a lot of shit we already know from the first one, but we have to just tell you again with this guy. And so Ash, I guess, is the name. It's a weird name. I don't know why you went with Ash. It's not fucking Ash Williams. Anyway, Ash and his son are killed by Judas's gang because I guess they witnessed them, and Judas has a no witnesses, so they end up killing both of them. Ash wakes up, and we see Sarah, I guess, is an adult. She works in some tattoo parlor, and you just see her walk through this. You just don't get it. It's like they really, all it looks like to me is just bad. It's just kind of current LA. It's like all dirty, and that's not the point of the city when you see it in the first movie. It wasn't just a fucked up looking aesthetic. It was like a fucked up world. This was just, dude, it just looks like homeless encampment almost. Just, it was bad. They didn't really even try to at least give the city some style. And that's what made the first one work. It didn't just look like a shitty city. That's what this looked like to me. I'm like, we're in the future and this is what it looked like. Even Blade Runner, where it was kind of a dystopian looking world, still had some style to it. There's no style with this city in this fucking movie. It's just, ugh, man, it's frustrating. It's like, did they just, you guys, you could have at least tried to make it. You're going to have it supposedly futuristic. You know what? Half the drugs they do are like neon colored. But I guess they don't want to go too, I guess they don't want to go too over the top futuristic. So we're going to make it look like just generic shitty cities. It was bad, man. I hated this movie. The fact that it's just a bad version of the first one. Instead, he wakes up from, unlike Eric, in the first one, Eric Draven wakes up from, the cemetery. In this one, he wakes up from water because he was dumped in the water. And this is where Sarah finds him. He freaks out, runs away from her because he's not realizing he's dead. And then he realizes he is because I think his memories kick in of what happened. And she tells him basically that you're back because you got to finish, get retribution for your son and for them killing you. And this is where I think, kind of like the first one, they introduce you to the villain. Judas is just an uninterested. He's just, generic mob boss. Like, you compare it to like Michael Wincott, who had character. Even Tony Todd, who was he's more like a kind of like a heavy. He's had some character. His sister, the Asian woman, she was a fucking crazy bitch, and she worked. When you have the villains in this are just uninteresting. They're just it's a bad film, man. In every shape, every way, shape, or form, man. They really didn't. It really shows you they never should have made a Crow sequel. I'm going to say this a lot. I don't care if I say this a lot, repeat it a lot. I will. Because it never needed one. I mean, in a perfect world, if Brandon Lee didn't die, yes, you could have made multiple Crow sequels, but it didn't happen, so you should have just left it alone. Because now you're just adding these shitty movies to the lore. Because from what I hear, pretty much none of the Crow sequels are good. Apparently there's a show, which I'm not going to watch. Some say, though, it's okay. I don't think I'm going to watch it either way. For me, Crow, with what happened, even as a series, I don't like the idea. I think just leave it alone. Just the Brandon Lee movie for me. that's it. I don't. This is just because like I said, he puts the makeup on, but there's not as much. Like when he put the makeup on in the first film, he had the song was "Burned by the Cure" playing, um, and it's like there was some style when he put There was none of that in this. I think actually I might change the title because I think really what this film is, it's the lack of the style of the original. Like it's a bad version of the original movie, but without the style. There's no style. Like everything like that first film did. One of the great things was style. Just even the scene when he puts the costume on, basically. You got the Cure Burn playing, and then he walks to the window. He has the crow on his shoulder, looking out the window, about to fucking get these guys. You don't have that here. He just kind of puts it on, and then he has a motorcycle, which I kind of hate. I I wouldn't hate like let's say for Brandon Lee one, there was one scene he had a motorcycle, it would have been fine, but he drives a motorcycle up the whole thing. It takes it out, takes me out of it because they're like, we don't want to shoot you jumping on buildings. That was much more fucking. Or sometimes you didn't necessarily see how he traveled. Like, yeah, you had the one scene where he was jumping, but sometimes I like that he could just appear. I like that aspect. You didn't need to see him on a motorcycle. That just takes me out of it. That just is like lazy. You're like, yeah, this is easier. We'll film you on a motorcycle. Um, so he kills the first I don't remember the name. It was like something Snake or whatever the fuck is one of the first people he kills, and he forces them to tell the story. Then this is where like kind of like the first one, not kind of like the first one where he's killing them and they have like the flashback, but it's better done. It's like so beautifully transitioned in the original. Like they're not just fucking I think it's the editing. It's like it's so badly edited. So when you have the flashback, it's badly edited in. So it's just like it goes from like him trying to kill the guy and then edit. It showed the edit of them, the bad guy doing whatever. It's like they try to force you to care when you just Eric Draven through little flashbacks made you care about the character and him and Shelley. This one you just don't feel that, man. And it's sad because, unfortunately, because they kill a kid, so that should make you angry. It does make me angry, but it doesn't make you like these bad guys are so boring though that you're not as invested. You're not like, okay, I can't wait for them to kill. I didn't feel that this time around, and it just really harmed the movie because I'm not like it's like I really just like this movie's a sludge. It's just bad scenes of him just reading poetry. He kills the one guy by blowing him up. Turv then shows up, and then this is where he warns Judas. And then like Turv is basically kind of like T-Bird. He's kind of like the T-Bird of the movie because he's like the second to the main, or one of the seconds, yeah, basically. And then Sarah and Ash, I guess, connect, and she mentions something about Eric Draven. So she's just there just so you could have something from the first movie. And I just didn't need her in the movie for me. I'm going to be honest. She's one of those characters. I don't want to see an adult version of her. The character works better as a little girl because it really hammered home, especially the plot with, her mom and all that. Her just being an adult and is just there to be, I'm going to say it, she's just there to be an exposition dump. She's just there to tell him the shit she learned from the first film. There's no need to bring her back. You could have, I don't know. It was just, that's all she was there for. Just like, the most we know, really, is that, yeah, she's a painter now. Yeah, she paints things. That's kind of it. That's like her only characteristic in this movie. Is that she paints shit. And it was so... Judas realizes And they need because it's kind of like the first, basically it's the first movie where, like, if you remember, when Michael Wincott realizes they take Sarah, because they know he can. But I get in this one they want the Judas wants to harness the crow's power, so he finds out, yeah, if you kill the crow, you can harness its power, basically become like him. Which that's a dumb rule. That's just done so you could have a crow fight in the end. The Battle of the Crows. That's all that was. It was a lame attempt to give the villain powers. When I like that, what they did was they in the end of the movie, the first one, he just fucking they take the crow to they don't kill it, but the crow's not near him, so he's a little bit underpowered. So that's why they end. Michael Wincott was able to, do damage to the crow. And I think that's what they should have done again. Instead of trying to do a lame, like, Battle of the Crows, and it was so bad. It was, ugh. Like, he even, like, Judas paints himself like the crow, and he has a jacket. What the fuck? It's like the battle of the, like, because they're both wannabes to me. Because Ash is just bad. So he kills another guy at some, like, I'm assuming it's some peep show where you pay and you can have, like, the women strip for you, basically. And he ends up killing another one of the members of Judas's gang. Like, they're so nameless. They're not, you don't care about them. The only one is memorable is Iggy Pop. And yeah, so Curve gets a call from him. So yeah, this is where they kidnap Sarah. He tries to rescue her, but then Ash ends up killing, no, Judas ends up killing the bird, and then draining, and this is where he gets the crow's power, and this is where we get the bad crow. I'm just kind of jumping to the end. Before, Curve ends up getting killed by, Ash, and whatever. It's so uneventful, too, how he kills some of these bad guys. It's like, compared in the first, I'm going to be comparing this one to the first one a lot. It just, it really is, just a dollar store version of the first. And that's kind of what that's the new title. Because that's what this is. It's the dollar store version of the first movie. Because the deaths are so uneventful in this one compared to when he killed the villains in the first one. Like, when he killed the villains in the first one, you were ready. Each of them got a pretty crazy death. Even Michael Wincott, he got fucked up. When he gave fucking, Eric gave him, like, Shelley's pain, and the pain, like, fucked up Michael, and he fell, and he got impaled on a gargoyle. And you see, like, the blood dripping out. That's how you do it. Like, in this, it's just, he dies. Judas gets impaled on, like some kind of, because they're like some dance festival, and he gets impaled on some kind of thing, a pole, and it's just uneventful how he dies. Oh no, and then, like, I guess they draw a bunch of crows to eat him. It was stupid. And then Sarah ends up dying because of her wounds, and it's not even like, you don't even care that she dies. It's just, and then he goes to the grave so he can rest, basically, with Sarah and his son. So, whatever. Fuck this movie. This never should have been made. And I've heard, though, that there apparently is the studio meddled with the parent. I've heard that there's a better script. I don't care if it's true or not. Like, to be honest with you, this never should have even existed. There never should have been a Crow 2. The Crow should have been one movie. And to me, it is one movie, but they never should have even tried to make those sequels. It was unnecessary. You didn't need to add these unnecessary sequels to the movies. It does nothing, because Eric Draven, for me, is what made those movies. So for you to try to do it with just somebody else, now it just looks like a bad version of the first, and that's what it was always gonna be, because it's the same premise. He wants to get revenge for something that was wrong. And I get the idea, because, like, there's multiple ghostwriters, but why that works is because there's more compelling. I just don't think there's enough with the Crow. If you're the only way if you truly did a sequel, if this is if Brandon Lee never died, you have Eric Draven be the main one, because he's your face. But when you're doing multiple ones, you fall into it's just a bad version of the first movie. That's all this is. The villain isn't as compelling. When Iggy Pop, who's like a side, at least he was hamming it up throughout the film, that you could tell he was kind of having fun with it. And the soundtrack was alright, but that's like the only positive I have with this movie is the soundtrack was decent. Everything else was just not good. The aesthetic wasn't there. The main character isn't there. His bad poetry lines, man. That's what it felt like. It was like he was reading, it was like he was trying to be a poet. It just did not work with the character. And the villain is uneventful. Like, he has no presence or anything like that. No, nothing. Iggy Pop should have probably been the main villain. I would have had him be Judas. At least he would have been at least compelling. He at least had some animated to him. But he was like the only character. Because, I didn't even mention, he kills some Asian chick she's the one who she's the one who shot his son. And you're just not into it. It's just like, whatever. He throws out the window. Okay. Alright. I know he did that with, the last kill in the first one, but at least the other kills were pretty eventful, so it was okay to get away with one death like that. And this, it was like all the deaths were like that. There was no style to them or anything. No style in general in this movie. But yeah, this is just really a dollar store version of the first one that never should have even existed. So 1.5 out of 10. There's no positives aside from the music. But anyways, guys, I'm going to end it here. And I have a feeling the sequels are going to get worse from here. Like, I feel like, you know what this feels like? This feels like almost like the Hellraiser sequels. But at least Hellraiser had... I was okay with Hellraiser 3 and okay with 4. So there's at least 2 decent sequels. So you had almost, really 3, but 4, okay, almost 4 decent movies. 1 and 2 were like on a different level though, but at least the last 2 were still decent. And then that 5 is where it got bad. This is just, there's only one good movie and then it just goes downhill. This just feels like that. Like there's just I don't feel like it's going to get any better from here, man. I just think we're and just, it's going to be all bad movies, man, from here. So, anyways, tomorrow, Truth or Dare, so another shit movie. So 2 bad movies within a day from each other. I will at least say, I think Truth or Dare might be a bit more fun bad, though, because this was just, there was nothing in this. But anyways, guys, man, alright, guys. Talk to y'all tomorrow. Peace.